Texas is famous for wide open skies, cattle ranches, and small towns where everybody waves at everybody. But underneath that friendly sun-baked surface, the state hides one of the most surprising collections of dangerous and unexpected wildlife in the entire country. We are not just talking about the animals you already assume live here. We are talking about creatures that most Texans themselves do not know are sharing their backyards, their lakes, and even their neighborhoods. Some are tiny and easy to overlook until it is too late. Some are apex predators quietly moving back into areas they vanished from decades ago. And some should not even be here at all, released by accident or by careless choice into rivers and ponds where they were never meant to survive. By the end of this video, you will understand why Texas quietly ranks among the most biologically unpredictable states in America. We are counting down 13 animals, from the surprising to the outright dangerous, and the very last one is responsible for more documented human deaths in Texas than almost anything else on this list. Stick around, because the top spot might completely change how you look at your own backyard. Before we get into it, if you are enjoying this kind of deep dive into the natural world, take a second to subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep making videos like this one. And I would love to know. Drop a comment below and tell me what part of the world you are watching from right now. It is always fascinating to see how far this content travels. Now, let us get into the list. At number 13, we have the ocelot. Most people picture jungles in South America when they think of wild spotted cats, not the brushlands of South Texas. Yet a small, critically endangered population of ocelots still survives in Cameron and Willacy counties, largely around the Laguna Atascosa National Wildlife Refuge. These cats typically weigh between 20 and 35 pounds, roughly the size of a large house cat, with a body length that can stretch close to 4 feet, including the tail. Ocelots are almost entirely nocturnal and famously secretive, which is exactly why so few Texans even know they exist within state lines. In terms of direct danger to people, ocelots pose almost none. They avoid humans, hunt small mammals and birds, and are far more likely to flee than confront. Their inclusion here is not about ferocity. It is about how genuinely shocking it is that a wild spotted cat still roams part of Texas today, clinging to survival in fragmented brushland habitat that keeps shrinking due to agriculture and development. Conservation groups have spent decades working to protect and reconnect the thorn scrub corridors these cats depend on, including wildlife crossings built specifically to reduce vehicle collisions, which remain one of the leading threats to the population's survival. For a state better known for cattle drives and oil fields, the idea of a spotted wild cat quietly slipping through the brush at night feels almost out of place. And yet it has been happening here for generations, mostly unnoticed. Moving further into that same shrinking wild corner of the state, we land on number 12, the jaguarundi. If the ocelot surprised you, this one will surprise you even more, because most Texans have never even heard of it. The jaguarundi is a small, slender wild cat with a body shape that almost looks more like a large weasel or otter than a typical cat, weighing in around 8 to 20 pounds. Historically documented in the brushlands near Brownsville, confirmed sightings in Texas have become exceedingly rare in recent decades, with wildlife biologists relying mostly on unconfirmed reports and trail camera speculation. Like the ocelot, the jaguarundi poses essentially no threat to humans. It hunts rodents, birds, and reptiles, and actively avoids people. What earns it a spot on this list is the sheer unexpectedness of its historical presence, a genuine wild cat species that may still, even now, be moving quietly through the same mesquite thickets where cattle graze and border towns sit just a few miles away. Unlike the ocelot, the jaguarundi has no recent confirmed breeding record in Texas, which places its status somewhere between rare resident and quiet ghost of the brushlands. Researchers continue to set up trail cameras across South Texas ranchland, hoping to capture solid proof of its continued presence. At number 11, we shift from secretive native cats to something far stranger: exotic fish that were never supposed to be in Texas at all. Over the years, Texas Parks and Wildlife has documented cases of piranhas being illegally released into private ponds, community lakes, and even public waterways, almost always by aquarium owners who could no longer care for a fish that outgrew its tank. Certain piranha species are illegal to possess in Texas specifically because of the ecological risk they pose if released into warm, slow-moving Texas waters. While piranha attacks on humans are exceedingly rare and often exaggerated in popular culture, wildlife officials treat any confirmed sighting seriously, since an established population could threaten native fish and other aquatic life. The idea that a South American predator built for stripping flesh from prey in tight schools could be swimming in a stock pond behind a Texas subdivision is exactly the kind of unexpected danger this list is built around. Because piranhas are tropical fish, most released individuals in Texas eventually die off once water temperatures drop in the winter months, which has so far prevented any lasting established population. Still, wildlife officials continue to ask anglers to report unusual catches, since a warm winter or a heated private pond could allow a small group to persist longer than expected. For our next entry, we travel from the water back onto land to number 10, escaped and released exotic pythons. Unlike Florida, Texas does not yet have a confirmed, self-sustaining wild population of giant constrictor snakes established across the landscape. However, wildlife officials and animal control services in the Houston metropolitan area have documented individual cases of large pythons, including Burmese pythons, turning up loose in neighborhoods, drainage systems, and wooded lots, almost always traced back to escaped or abandoned exotic pets. These snakes can grow well over 10 feet long and, in rare cases, over 15 feet, with the strength to overpower medium-sized animals through constriction. While a fatal attack on an adult human is extremely rare and not something documented in Texas, the mere presence of an apex constrictor snake loose in a suburban drainage ditch is the kind of scenario most residents assume only happens somewhere else. It is a quiet reminder that the exotic pet trade has consequences that ripple far beyond the pet store. Wildlife officials in Texas keep a close watch on this issue precisely because of what happened in Florida, where escaped and released Burmese pythons established a massive breeding population across the Everglades, devastating native mammal numbers within just a few decades. Texas has taken steps to restrict ownership and require permits for certain large constrictor species specifically to avoid a repeat of that ecological disaster within its own wetlands and river bottoms. Number 9 brings us to a much smaller but statistically far more relevant threat: the brown recluse spider. Native across much of the central and southern United States, including large parts of Texas, the brown recluse is a reclusive, light brown spider, typically identified by a dark violin-shaped marking on its back. Though this feature is not always clearly visible, its bite delivers a necrotic venom that, in a small percentage of cases, can cause significant tissue damage around the bite site. Most bites are mild and heal without major incident, but medically documented cases exist of severe reactions requiring hospitalization, particularly in children or individuals with compromised immune systems. Brown recluses prefer dark, undisturbed spaces such as wood piles, storage boxes, garages, and closets, which means most bites happen when a person unknowingly puts a hand into a space the spider has been quietly living in for weeks. It is a genuinely dangerous animal hiding in plain sight inside homes across the state. At number 8, we head into the shadows of rock piles and shoe closets for the striped bark scorpion, the most common and most widespread scorpion species in Texas. Typically measuring around 2.5 inches long, this pale yellow to tan scorpion is found throughout most of the state, frequently making its way indoors through gaps in doors, windows, and foundations. Its sting is painful, often compared to a sharp burning sensation, but for most healthy adults it is not medically dangerous. However, documented cases show that young children, the elderly, and people with allergic sensitivities can experience much more severe reactions, occasionally requiring emergency medical treatment. What makes this scorpion worth including is not raw lethality, but sheer frequency of encounter. Pest control companies across Texas report striped bark scorpions as one of the most common calls they receive, meaning this is very likely an animal already living somewhere inside or around your own house right now, whether you have ever seen it or not. If small stinging creatures were not unsettling enough, at number 7 we move to a genuine apex predator quietly reclaiming lost ground, the black bear. For decades, black bears were considered functionally extinct across most of Texas, wiped out by the early 20th century through hunting and habitat loss. Since the 1980s and 1990s, however, black bears have been migrating back into far west Texas, particularly around Big Bend National Park, recolonizing naturally from populations in northern Mexico. Adult male black bears in this region can weigh anywhere from 150 to over 300 pounds, powerful enough to be genuinely dangerous if a close encounter goes wrong. Fortunately, there is no documented history of a fatal black bear attack on a human within Texas. Still, wildlife officials in Big Bend actively monitor bear activity and issue guidance to hikers and campers, because an animal that vanished from most Texans' imagination for nearly a century is now, quite literally, walking back into the state. Park rangers regularly remind campers to properly store food and use bear-proof containers, a precaution that would have seemed unnecessary in Texas just a generation ago. The bear's return is widely regarded by wildlife biologists as one of the great natural recovery stories in the state's modern history, even as it introduces a genuinely powerful predator back into areas where humans had grown used to its absence. Number 6 takes us from the mountains to the edges of Texas suburbs themselves, the mountain lion, also known as the cougar or puma. Long assumed by many residents to only exist in remote wilderness, mountain lions actually maintain a breeding population across West Texas and the Texas Hill Country, with confirmed sightings occasionally reported far closer to populated areas than most people expect, including brush country near expanding suburban development. An adult mountain lion can weigh well over 100 pounds and is capable of taking down prey many times its size using powerful ambush tactics. While confirmed mountain lion attacks on humans in Texas are extremely rare, wildlife agencies do document occasional close encounters, particularly involving pets or livestock near the edges of rural properties. As Texas cities continue expanding into former ranch land and canyon country, encounters between mountain lions and residents have slowly become more frequent, turning what many assume is a distant wilderness animal into an increasingly real neighbor. Unlike many states out west, Texas does not classify the mountain lion as a game animal with hunting regulations, which has made it harder for wildlife agencies to track population numbers with precision. That uncertainty adds to the sense of an animal moving through the landscape largely on its own terms, seen more often in trail camera footage than in person, yet still very much present. If you are finding this journey through Texas wildlife as surprising as I did putting it together, now is a great time to hit that subscribe button because the animals coming up from here are significantly more dangerous than anything we have covered so far. At number 5, we return to the reptile world for the Texas coral snake, the only member of the highly venomous elipid family found in the state. Easily identified by its striking pattern of red, yellow, and black bands, the Texas coral snake is often confused with the harmless, similarly colored milk snake, which has led to the old rhyme many Texans grew up with about red touching yellow being dangerous. Coral snakes are shy and rarely aggressive, typically biting only when handled or stepped on directly. However, their venom is a potent neurotoxin that affects the nervous system rather than causing localized tissue damage like a pit viper bite. Documented coral snake bites in Texas are uncommon compared to rattlesnake or copperhead bites, but when envenomation does occur, it requires immediate medical treatment since symptoms can be delayed and then progress seriously. Its beauty is exactly what makes it dangerous, an animal that looks almost decorative but carries one of the most medically serious venoms in the state. Number 4 brings us to the copperhead, arguably the snake most Texans have unknowingly walked past without ever noticing. With a coppery hourglass-patterned body that blends almost perfectly into leaf litter and rocky ground, copperheads are responsible for a significant number of documented snake bites across Texas every single year, more than almost any other venomous species in the state. This is largely because copperheads are not particularly aggressive, but they are extremely well camouflaged and tend to freeze rather than flee when approached, which means people often step near or directly on them without realizing it. Their venom, while rarely fatal to healthy adults, causes significant pain, swelling, and tissue damage, and documented cases exist of serious complications, particularly in children or in bites left untreated. Copperheads are common in wooded areas, suburban gardens, and even under piles of leaves in backyards across much of the state, making them one of the most frequently encountered dangerous animals most Texans never see coming. For number 3, we head toward Texas waterways, swamps, and slow-moving rivers for the cottonmouth, also widely known as the water moccasin. Found primarily in east and southeast Texas, this heavy-bodied, semi-aquatic pit viper is often confused with harmless water snakes, leading to far more close encounters than most people realize. Cottonmouths get their name from the pale white interior of their mouth, which they display as a defensive warning when threatened. Documented bites, while less common than copperhead bites, tend to be more medically serious since cottonmouth venom is more potent and causes significant tissue damage if untreated. Unlike many snake species, cottonmouths are also known to stand their ground rather than immediately flee, which increases the odds of a dangerous encounter for waders, fishermen, and swimmers who accidentally get too close to a spot along the bank where one is resting. In the humid river bottoms of East Texas, this is a genuinely serious, well-documented threat hiding just beneath the surface. At number 2, we arrive at the snake most associated with Texas itself, the western diamondback rattlesnake. Found throughout nearly the entire state, from arid West Texas to the hill country and beyond, the western diamondback is responsible for more documented venomous snake bites in Texas than any other single species, and it is considered the most medically significant snake in the state due to sheer frequency of human encounters. Adult diamondbacks typically range from 3 to over 5 feet in length, and their venom is a potent mix that damages tissue and affects blood clotting, requiring prompt anti-venom treatment in serious cases. What makes the diamondback especially notable is its signature rattle, an evolved warning system designed specifically to avoid confrontation with larger animals. including humans. Despite this built-in warning, documented bites still occur regularly across the state, especially during warmer months when both snakes and outdoor activity increase, making it a near-constant, well-known presence across almost every region of Texas. And that brings us to number 1. The animal responsible for more documented human deaths in Texas over recent decades than any other creature on this entire list, the Africanized honeybee, often called the killer bee. Descended from bees originally imported to Brazil in the 1950s for breeding purposes before escaping captivity, Africanized honeybees gradually spread north through Central America and Mexico before establishing populations across South and Central Texas by the early 1990s. Individually, an Africanized bee's sting is no more potent than that of a typical European honeybee. The danger comes from colony behavior. Africanized bee colonies defend their hives far more aggressively, respond to disturbances in much larger numbers, and will pursue perceived threats over significantly longer distances than standard honeybee colonies. Documented fatal incidents in Texas have involved individuals, often working outdoors, elderly residents, or people using machinery near hidden hives, being stung hundreds of times after inadvertently disturbing a colony. Because Africanized bee colonies can establish themselves in unexpected places, wall cavities, sheds, old tires, and underground cavities, many Texans have unknowingly lived or worked near an aggressive hive without ever realizing the risk until it was disturbed. It is a strange, almost invisible danger. An insect most people dismiss as background noise, quietly responsible for more documented fatalities in Texas than snakes, spiders, or any predator on this list. So there you have it, 13 animals hiding across Texas that most people would never expect. From secretive spotted cats clinging to survival in South Texas brushland, to a returning population of black bears in Big Bend, to the surprisingly deadly presence of Africanized honeybees claiming the top spot. Of course, a list like this could easily include other contenders, alligators in East Texas swamps, fire ants, or even the occasional escaped exotic animal from a private collection. That is exactly why I want to hear from you. If you think another Texas animal deserves a spot on this list, or if you would have ranked these 13 differently, drop your own ranking in the comments below. This community always has stories and local knowledge that add so much to these videos. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, and I will see you in the next one.